Once upon a time, in a small village nestled by the great river of Oda, there lived a man named Kwame. He was a young and ambitious man who dreamed of greatness, of building an empire that would last for generations. He spoke often of his vision for wealth and success, and many in the village listened, eager to follow him. But Kwame was not kind in his ambition. He believed that the path to power was through control, and he used his two brothers, Kofi and Nana, to build his network. Though they trusted him, they did not know what was to come. In the beginning, Kwame's words were sweet and his promises many. But soon, his attitude turned harsh. He would belittle Kofi for every mistake, make Nana feel small, and push his brothers beyond their limits, all in the name of success. It was not long before Kofi and Nana began to doubt the man they once looked up to. And when the winds of change began to blow, Kwame's dreams began to crumble. His arrogance would be his downfall, and as he watched his empire fall apart, Kwame would learn that true strength comes not from domination, but from lifting others. In this story, we will follow Kwame's rise and tragic fall. We will see the power of arrogance and the pain of betrayal. We will learn the lesson that no one can build an empire alone, and those who push others down may find themselves with no one left to lead. But the most chilling part of this tale is not just Kwame's fall, it is the price he pays for his actions, a price that will echo throughout the land for years to come. This is the story of Kwame's broken empire. Kwame stood on the edge of the village, looking out at the vast stretch of land beneath him. The river Oda glittered in the sunlight, and he felt the weight of his dreams pressing down on his shoulders. One day, all of this will be mine, he whispered to himself. He had heard of the great network marketers in distant cities who had risen from nothing to become powerful figures, and he believed that he could do the same. He called his brothers, Kofi and Nana, to join him in his grand plan. We will build something great together, he said, his voice full of hope. We will spread this business far and wide. I will teach you all I know. Kofi and Nana, though unsure, trusted their older brother. They had seen his ambition, and they believed in his vision. At first, the business seemed to grow. Kofi and Nana worked hard, following Kwame's every instruction. But soon, they began to notice something disturbing. Kwame was not the man he appeared to be. He was harsh and unforgiving. Whenever Kofi made a mistake, Kwame would shout at him, calling him foolish and lazy. Nana, too, was not spared. Every mistake, no matter how small, was met with scorn. Why are you two so slow? Kwame would yell. You are nothing but burdens to me. Kofi and Nana began to grow disheartened. They had thought they were part of something special, but now they felt like pawns in Kwame's game. They were tired of being belittled, and the joy they once had for the business was fading. But despite their discomfort, they stayed, not wanting to disappoint their brother. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Kofi and Nana sat in their small room, the walls thick with the tension that had been building for days. They could hear Kwame's voice echoing from the next room, where he was speaking to a new recruit. His words were filled with promises, but there was something about his tone that made both brothers uneasy. Kwame is changing, Nana whispered, his voice full of worry. He's not the same man we started this journey with. Kofi nodded. He used to believe in us. But now, it feels like he's just using us. The brothers sat in silence for a long time, each lost in their thoughts. They had hoped that their hard work would pay off, but the weight of Kwame's constant criticism had begun to break them. Kofi was the first to speak. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. Nana sighed. Neither can I. We've worked so hard, but it's never enough for him. He's never satisfied. The next day, as the sun rose high in the sky, Kofi and Nana made a decision. They would leave. It was not an easy choice, but they knew that their dreams would never come true under Kwame's harsh rule. They packed their things quietly, trying not to wake their brother. When they were done, they left the house and walked away, leaving behind the empire they had helped build. Kwame, unaware of their departure, continued with his plans. But as the days passed, he began to notice that something was missing. His team had shrunk, and the business was no longer growing. At first, he thought it was just a setback. But then, one by one, others began to leave. His reputation had spread far and wide, and the villagers no longer wanted to work with a man known for his cruelty. Kwame's frustration grew as his empire continued to fall apart. He had tried to recruit new people, but they all refused. Word had spread about his treatment of Kofi and Nana, and no one was willing to work with a man who treated his brothers like slaves. It wasn't long before the market became empty, his name no longer a symbol of power, but a joke. One day, as Kwame sat alone in his house, staring at the empty room where his brothers once sat, he realized the truth. He had pushed everyone away. The very people who had believed in him, worked alongside him, had all left. His dreams of power and success were gone, and there was no one left to build his empire. It was then that he understood the lesson that had been before him all along: true strength lies in lifting others, not pushing them away with words. But by the time he learned this, it was too late. Kwame's empire had crumbled, and with it, his pride. He had no one left to lead, no one left to trust. In the silence of his once thriving home, Kwame wept. His ambition had destroyed him. His arrogance had cost him everything. And so, Kwame was left to wander the village, a shadow of the man he once was. His name was no longer spoken with respect. The broken empire of Kwame was a tale told by the elders, a story of a man who had everything and lost it all because he refused to lift others. As the days went by, Kwame's isolation grew. He had not seen Kofi or Nana since the day they left. He spent his days trying to recruit new people into his network, but each attempt was met with failure. His name had become synonymous with cruelty, and the villagers had begun to avoid him. Kwame's pride, however, refused to let him see the truth. His arrogance had cost him everything. One afternoon, after a long day of fruitless efforts, Kwame sat beneath a large baobab tree, feeling the weight of his failure. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the land. The world around him seemed peaceful, but within him, there was a storm. He closed his eyes and remembered the days when things were different, when his business was thriving, when Kofi and Nana looked up to him, when the future seemed bright. "I will fix this," he muttered to himself. He refused to let his empire crumble without a fight. He would beg Kofi and Nana to come back, he would apologize, and he would make things right. In that moment, Kwame's desperation outweighed his pride. He sent messengers to his brothers, begging them to return. "I was wrong," he wrote. "I need you. Please come back. Together, we can rebuild everything." Days passed without a response. Kwame waited, his heart heavy with regret, but the silence continued. The more he waited, the more his desperation grew. He couldn't face the reality that his brothers might never return. A week later, Kwame received a letter, not from Kofi or Nana, but from a wealthy trader named Beo who had recently heard about Kwame's business. Beo had a reputation for being ruthless in business, but his wealth was undeniable. The letter was an offer. Beo wanted to work with Kwame, to help him rebuild his network. In exchange, Kwame would have to follow Beo's rules, including submitting to his leadership in some ways. Kwame, desperate to rebuild his empire, was torn. He knew that working with Beo meant compromising his pride even further, but the promise of success was too tempting. He needed people, he needed power, and Beo's offer seemed like the only way forward. Kwame met with Beo the next day, at a large market just outside the village. The air was thick with the smell of spices and fresh fish, and traders were shouting as they made deals. Beo was a tall man with sharp features, and his eyes gleamed with ambition. "Kwame," Beo said with a sly grin. "You've made a name for yourself, but I can help you take it further. With my connections and your drive, we can create something even bigger than you've imagined. All you need to do is let me take the lead in some matters." Kwame felt his heart race. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes," he said. "I just want my empire back." Beo smiled. "That's good. Trust me, together we will build something powerful." However, deep down, Kwame knew that by giving in to Beo, he was not only compromising his values but also moving further away from the idea of building something with the people he once cared about. A month passed after Kwame's meeting with Beo, and things were beginning to shift. Kwame's new network under Beo's influence was growing, but it wasn't the success he had hoped for. His pride had taken a back seat to Beo's tactics, and Kwame had found himself making deals and compromises he would have never considered before. Then, one fateful evening, just as Kwame was about to make another deal with Beo, he received a message from Kofi. His heart skipped a beat. Kofi had agreed to meet him. The two brothers met at a quiet spot by the river, where they used to play as children. Kofi's face was somber, but there was no anger in his eyes, only sadness. "Kwame, we've heard about what you've been doing with Beo," Kofi said quietly. "We've seen how far you've fallen. You promised us once that we would build something together, but now you've lost yourself. You've forgotten what really matters." Kwame's throat tightened. "I needed help, Kofi. I couldn't do it alone. Beo offered me the power to rebuild everything we lost." Kofi shook his head. "Power is nothing without respect. You've become a shadow of the man you were. You can't expect to build anything on a foundation of lies." Nana, who had been silent, spoke up. "We were always willing to support you, but we couldn't stand by while you pushed us aside. You used us, Kwame. You made us feel worthless." Kwame lowered his head in shame. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I thought I could do it all by myself. I've hurt you both, and I've hurt myself." For a moment, there was silence between the three of them. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air. But as the evening wind blew gently through the trees, Kofi placed his hand on Kwame's shoulder. "It's not too late, Kwame," Kofi said. "You can still fix this. But it has to be done the right way, by lifting others, not by pushing them down." Kwame's mind was in turmoil. He had spent so much time trying to build his empire through control and arrogance that now he was lost in how to fix things. He had tried to mend his relationship with Kofi and Nana, but the damage seemed too deep. They had left his side once, and he feared that the trust was gone for good. As he continued working with Beo, his network was indeed growing, but it felt hollow. The people around him were not the loyal, hardworking villagers he once dreamed of working with. They were simply individuals looking for their own gain. Kwame knew that he could not rely on them the way he had relied on his brothers. His pride, once so strong, was now a fragile thing, shattered by his own actions. One day, after another failed recruitment attempt, Kwame found himself alone in his house. The walls seemed to close in on him, and the silence echoed in his ears. He was haunted by the faces of Kofi and Nana, the faces of the people he had once trusted. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Beo. But this time, his face was stern, his demeanor cold. "Kwame," Beo said. "I've given you everything. The power, the business. But you failed me. I've seen your weakness, and I'm pulling out. You've become a liability." Kwame's heart sank. He realized that Beo had only ever seen him as a tool for his own gain, just as he had used Kofi and Nana. In his desperation, Kwame had once again fallen into the trap of using others for his own benefit. But this time, there would be no one left to turn to. Kwame stood alone in his house, his mind reeling from Beo's words. His empire was slipping through his fingers, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the heavy weight of failure. As he sat in the dimly lit room, a sudden coldness swept through the air. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Something was wrong. The door creaked open slowly, though no one was there. Kwame's heart pounded in his chest as he got up to investigate. He peered into the darkness of the empty room, but everything seemed still. The only sound was the rustling of the trees outside, their leaves swaying in the wind. But then, he heard a voice, a low, gravelly whisper, as if carried by the wind itself. "You have broken the trust of your people, Kwame. Now, the shadows will come for you." Kwame froze, his blood running cold. His eyes darted around the room, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost as if it were right next to him. "You cannot escape what you've done. The curse of your actions will haunt you." Terrified, Kwame stumbled backward, but the voice continued, now louder, more insistent. Power gained by hurting others is a power that will turn on you. You will be alone in your darkest hour. The room grew colder, and Kwame felt an icy chill grip his heart. He could hear footsteps behind him, but when he turned around, there was no one there. The shadows on the walls seemed to move, stretching toward him like fingers. The voice faded into the wind, and the house grew silent once more. But Kwame knew that something had changed. He had been warned, and deep down, he feared that the cause of his actions was only just beginning. As days turned into weeks, Kwame tried to rebuild his business with Beo's help. But despite all his efforts, the darkness in his heart grew. The weight of his arrogance, his harshness toward Kofi and Nana, and his desperate greed for power clouded his judgment. One morning, while Kwame was preparing to meet some new recruits, Beo approached him with a grim expression. "I have some news," Beo said, his voice low and cold. "One of your former recruits, Amina, has been spreading rumors about you. She says that you are a cruel leader who only uses people to climb higher. She is warning others not to trust you." Kwame felt a surge of anger. "How dare she speak against me?" he spat. "I built this business, and she has no right to tarnish my name." But Beo held up a hand. "Calm down, Kwame. The damage is done. People are starting to question your leadership. They are leaving. You're losing control." Kwame's heart raced. He had always believed that his strength came from power, from controlling others. But now, it seemed that his empire was crumbling before his very eyes. People were starting to see through the facade. Beo's eyes narrowed. "You've become a liability, Kwame. I've given you everything, and now you are failing me. You need to decide, continue down this path of destruction, or face the consequences." Kwame clenched his fist. His anger boiled over, but deep down, he knew Beo was right. He had lost control, not just of his business, but of his life. The power he sought had begun to slip from his grasp. As the days grew darker, Kwame's desperation grew. One evening, as he walked through the village, he saw an old woman sitting by the road, her face hidden behind a veil of white cloth. She seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. When Kwame passed by, she suddenly spoke, her voice raspy, yet clear. "Kwame, I have seen your pain. I know what troubles your heart." Kwame stopped in his tracks. "Who are you? What do you know of me?" The woman slowly lifted her veil, revealing her aged, weathered face. "I am called Ya, the village seer. I have the power to see beyond what the eyes can perceive. I know of your struggles, your greed, and the darkness you have allowed into your soul." Kwame's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I've worked hard for this, nothing comes without sacrifice." Ya shook her head. "You have sacrificed too much, Kwame. You have lost the trust of those who cared for you. You have betrayed your own family. And now, the spirits are angry. They are watching you, waiting for the moment when you will pay the price for your arrogance." Kwame laughed nervously. "Spirits? You're just an old woman with tales and warnings. I don't believe in such things." Ya's eyes glinted with wisdom. "The spirits do not care whether you believe or not. They have already marked you. Your empire is built on a shaky foundation, and soon it will crumble. The curse of greed and arrogance has no mercy." With that, Ya stood up slowly, her voice low but powerful. "Remember, Kwame, the price of ambition is paid in full. The more you seek to control, the more you lose yourself. The spirits will not forget." Kwame watched as Ya disappeared into the night, her figure swallowed by the darkness. He could feel a chill creeping up his spine. The warning had struck him deeply, and for the first time, doubt began to creep into his heart. Was his success truly worth all the pain he had caused? That night, as Kwame lay in his bed, he could not sleep. The words of Ya echoed in his mind, and he found himself staring at the ceiling, haunted by the events of the past. He had once dreamed of ruling over an empire, of becoming the most powerful man in the village. But now, his empire felt like a prison, empty, cold, and filled with echoes of betrayal. As he lay there in the darkness, something strange began to happen. He could hear voices, whispers coming from all directions. They were faint at first, but soon they grew louder, more distinct. It was as if the walls were closing in on him. "Kwame, you used us," one voice said. "You pushed us aside when you no longer needed us." Another voice joined in. "You destroyed the trust we had. Now, you will suffer the consequences." Kwame's heart pounded in his chest. He recognized the voices. They were the voices of Kofi and Nana, of the people he had hurt and betrayed. The air around him grew heavy, and the whispers became more frantic. "You cannot escape what you've done," the voices chanted. "The spirits are watching. The darkness will find you." Terrified, Kwame jumped out of bed, his breath coming in short gasps. But the voices did not stop. They continued to surround him, growing louder, until it felt as though the very air itself was thick with the weight of his actions. Kwame fell to his knees, his hands trembling. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But the voices continued. The shadows grew darker. He had become a prisoner in his own mind, tormented by the ghost of his past. Morals of the story. The price of ambition is often paid in full. Those who seek power at the cost of others will find themselves isolated and lost. Betrayal leaves a scar that cannot be easily healed. Trust, once broken, is hard to regain. Greed and arrogance may build an empire, but they also tear it down from within. The spirits of the past will always remind us of our wrongdoings. We can never escape the consequences of our actions. The road to Kwame's redemption seems longer than ever. As the spirits and the voices of the lost continue to haunt him, it becomes clear that his journey is far from over. The darkness is closing in, and Kwame's fall is imminent. What will he do next?